jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
So, welcome back to the show. Cam Soley, David German, and Daniel Ryan. We're all here today. How are you doing, Daniel?
Not bad. October is kind of getting to me at this point. It's getting cold.
I hear you.
Into bed much earlier than normal, but otherwise I'm fine.
Right? Weather is something else here. Speaking of storms, there's quite a storm unleashed in this unusual cult franchise. So yeah, the Omen began around 76, continued into 78 as they were helmed by Richard Donner, and then continued into the 80s, and then was followed by a 90s made-for-TV sequel. So
Remake.
Oh, remake. Okay. Oh yeah, there was a remake. Yeah, in 06. So it's always been an interesting one. They would show these nonstop on places like A&E and mainly AMC nowadays, because they like to do old school stuff like Amityville Horror 1 and 2. So it made sense that they would put this up here. So what was your intro to this? I would hear a lot of people talking about it, but I didn't really see much of it until like years later.
Honestly, the first one was my intro, and I saw it on just basic TV. It probably would have been like late 90s, early 2000s.
Nice.
I had seen it, of course, in Blockbuster. I'd heard all about it, but I'd never really gotten around to watching it, which is crazy because I actually love Gregory Peck.
Yeah. He was definitely one of the ones like you would hear about. Is like, oh yeah, he's in this, and William Holden's in part 2, and a lot of actors got their start in here. Sam Neill's in part 3 as Damien, so that was definitely one of his first roles, and I definitely, that's my personal favorite, just because it's not as bad as it's been made out to be, and it's just kind of a fun, just almost nightmarish look at someone in power who ends up kind of unleashing all this chaos upon the world.
As Team America said, now I shall bring chaos to the world.
And it's definitely got some hammy acting moments in all of them. Part 2, I've been meaning to rewatch again, but there's just something about it. It's a bitch to get into. I cannot get into it. And there's nothing, it's not bad. It's not awful, but it is just kind of one of those, just like, I just feel like it's not really adding much to the first one, because the first one's a pretty quick, simple, and tight movie under Richard Donner's direction. And I think in pop culture, this has always been interesting because it's kind of, whenever there's any satanic or nightmarish kind of home invasion or evil kid kind of movie, if anyone's not comparing it to something like The Exorcist or nowadays even Hereditary, they're definitely comparing it to The Omen.
Yeah, and it's actually because like The Exorcist and The Omen are almost like conjoined twins in a way.
Yeah, it's like
that whole demonic post-apocalyptic And it's particularly these days, when we've gotten accustomed to every few years, some nut springs up speaking about, the world's going to end on such and such,
Yeah, too much
on
free
New Year's
time.
Eve on Valentine's Day.
We had to make some exception. For whatever reason, this year is different than other years. We don't know why, but it is.
But looking back and realizing in like the 60s and 70s, that whole thing was just coming into vogue. Well,
I know, yeah.
it existed as long as humanity is, but it was coming into vogue in pop culture here in the States at that point.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We might talk about video games,
Music.
Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Yes.
I am the master storyteller
Yes.
of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers,
Yes.
the Google Play,
Yes.
Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah.
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair say
Ah. Ah.
all
Yeah.
that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we'll end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen, and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
could you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-liner plot holes and gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Hi, everybody. It's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything. Pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant. 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
We now continue with our program.
I guess they were just striking while the iron was hot.
Totally, where you start seeing an increase in televangelists, different kind of church groups divided up, even still seeing a strong presence of satanic participants, which is both morbid.
Massacre right around the time this movie got released. And...
Oh, yeah. We're seeing, Jim Jones and all these other guys just scar the worlds years before other scandals like, every other, and it's just not what we need. Yeah, we're seeing Watergate, and this is years even before OJ is just showing that people will just tune into TV just to see awful people in court, let alone saying awful stuff and wondering, how can this happen? How can this be? So much like The Exorcist, The Omen also had a TV show reimagining called Damien, and I meant to see it, could never find it. I think you can find it on Amazon Prime. I heard it was pretty good, but it was just kind of abruptly canceled.
Yeah, I will admit that one flew under my radar. I barely remember it.
Well, and whoever does the programming really needs to really wake up and say, hey, you got to start either repeating the TV episodes after they air throughout the week, or you got to do some other better time to have it on, because, you know, everyone has private lives. People are more likely to just have a random show on streaming and as they bullshit around in bed and go to sleep.
On a related note, I actually liked the Fox show Sleepy Hollow while it was on, and The Exorcist. Those were both pretty short-lived, and I feel like there was just this impatience of, you know, it has to be a mega blockbuster hit, or we're just going to yank the plug. And that's what happened with both of them. They did well, just not as much as they wanted, so they lost patience and stopped trying and just yanked the plug.
Yeah, Fox is always, and NBC are always the worst at just promoting stuff, but I always saw parts of Sleepy Hollow, especially the Bones crossovers episodes. But yeah, Exorcist I meant to watch because I know Gina Davis was in it, and I'm actually good friends with the script supervisor on that show, Eve Butterly.
Oh.
And she's just a delightful person. I hope her indie film career goes somewhere soon. But yeah, she said that was just a moment of opportunity. She just got called out of the blue and was like, hey, how about you come down to Chicago where we're filming this little... It was like a very lower budgeted show, I think, and most of the budget, I think, was just spent on the star power and whatever limited location they got. But yeah, I always meant to see it, and like you say, it was just crap time zone. But yeah, I've heard good things, and I'll take your recommendation again. So would you say these first three Omen films kind of flow together rather well, and then this Awakening, whatever the hell bullshit that was made for TV, is just kind of a pain in the ass?
It's another one where I would have to compare to The Exorcist. The first one is actually, in my opinion, a very good atmospheric film, a lot of great acting, phenomenal musical score. The second one is a total acid trip of a film where you just wonder, what the hell were they thinking when they came up with this?
Yeah.
The third one, they get kind of back on formula, but by that point, that second one is already in your memory banks. It's not going away.
Exactly. In this case, Omen 2 is hardly a bad movie, but it's even better than Jaws 2, but it's also just doesn't really stand out. It's just kind of complimentary, but it's not remarkable in any way. But yeah, Part 3, pretty underrated. But like you say, it just can't measure up to the first one, really. Although third one does really benefit here from some star power. It's just kind of one of those, it's just, if you're going to watch any of these, you know what you're in for. I have only seen parts of the remake, and long story short, they didn't need to bother. I didn't find it outrageously bad, but it was kind of just like, okay, I don't know what they were going for with this. Did you ever see that one, or was it just kind of one of those, why bother?
Never seen it all the way through, only like bits and pieces here and there.
It had a pretty memorable end decapitation. I remember that, and Liev Schreiber was pretty good. Roger Ebert surprisingly thought it was pretty well done. Stephen Hunter even remarked about it, but yeah, there were other people who were like, fuck that movie. I remember at the time.
And probably one of my biggest gripes with the whole franchise is that I think it's a concept that really only works when the character Damien is a kid.
That's fair enough. And Greg,
like a big source of conflict in the original. Pardon my interrupting there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that's pretty much it. The same thing with The Exorcist. You know, when it's just focused on Linda Blair, it holds together. When you focus on all this other shit,
it's that conflict of how can this innocent child be the ultimate evil? You know.
Well, and
how do their parents, who actually do love them, deal with that? That's the real source of the story there.
Exactly.
And by the time you make that character an adult, it kind of loses its meaning.
Pretty much. I mean, overall, as a whole, basically, even though these movies are big budget, it just shows you that regardless of your budget, when you just restrict it to just very few locations, you don't have you have more time to just get the feel, the tone, the just everything just down to a T, instead of be distracted by all this other shit, all these other reshoots, all these other locations and continuity potential errors. So I think that's just exactly it. They were mostly restricted to just one place, and so then they have all this time to have all these expensive, overhead shots of the entire house and other terror in the household, instead of just, like other franchises, like where's Chucky, where's, what part of town is he terrorizing next, instead of, they're not doing what every other franchise does, where what part of the lake is Jason going to come out from.
It's a good example of where sometimes all you need is some good writing and acting.
Good writing. In fact, I wouldn't even say the script's remarkable, but it just feels bigger than it is because it's not pedestrian. It's well edited. It's very well scored. The score was by none other than Jerry Goldsmith, so that's why it definitely stands out to me. Yeah, Mr. Star Trek Planet of the Apes there. So yeah, if I had to rank these, watch part 1 or free. It doesn't really matter. Watch part 2 if you're interested, but if not, you're not missing anything. Part 4, do not bother. Remake you can watch, but again, much like part 2, it's not as bad as you would think it would be, but you're really not missing anything. And I can't comment on Damien, but I've heard good things, so check that out. It's definitely, I'm actually surprised at how many people haven't even seen these. More of them had mainly seen Amityville and all the...
It is one that has kind of fallen into obscurity.
Yeah, and I don't know why, because last I checked, Fox had done all these home video, like 4-packs and everything, so, and they come on the HBO stations quite a lot nowadays, so I don't know. Definitely underrated, if not mind-blowing.
Sure, the original particularly.
Oh, yeah. And definitely a must-see for Gregory Peck fans, because this is when he starts doing more into the world kind of stuff, but very layered, not infamous or unorganized type material. And, everybody's remembering him for, To Kill a Mockingbird and other Western classics, but I mean, he really...
Moby Dick.
Yeah, Moby Dick. And he honestly... towards the end of his career, when he starts being in stuff like The Boys from Brazil and Duel in the Sun, this is definitely the perfect counterbalance, especially because he's still kind of in Cape Fear mode, although with a bigger mustache. Just having a home invasion, only, a kid, who's somehow...
The Antichrist.
Right, got Satan blood in him.
And I will probably say, without getting too social commentary, in a way that's the one big drawback. I look at the original Omen and I just say, I kind of blame it for that, almost that subgenre where you've got, shit like the Left Behind movies, that they portray the Antichrist as a politician or a billionaire or whatnot. It became a really eye-rolling cliche, and I think you can kind of point back to this one and say, yeah, this is the start.
Yeah, this one definitely dates better, as opposed to having to be very just overburdened, very heavy-handed with, symbolic imagery, or forcing one's opinion of whatever religion you're associated with upon the viewer. It's just like, whatever happened to, this and The Exorcist definitely made a good point of, hey, we're just showing what the character thinks, regardless of whether you agree with it, because at least we got your emotional support from the viewer. We're making you believe some actual person is watching something awful happen to someone and they don't know how to solve the problem, because how do you fight Satan? And that is true. Yeah, just all these, God's not dead and other crap has just been like, seriously? that doesn't really even allow for any suspense. That's just very burdensome. Yeah, it's just a bad movie. I kind of like stuff like In the Days, but that's more trashy fun as opposed to, you gotta see it. You gotta see it.
Schwarzenegger of all people.
Right. What, and Gabriel Byrne hamming it up. I got nothing else to really say except I totally recommend. So where on the interwebs can we find you, Danny Boy? Danny Boy.
As always, the Nightmare Nerd, as I say in the house that screams. You can find me on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. I also write for the House That Screams. I participate in the House That Screams, and I write for the House of Tortured Souls. I'm in too many houses here, aren't I?
Well, there you go. Thank you all for listening to this mini review.
Watch The Mark of the Beast.
Oh!
There.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up